Welcome and thanks for joining me on HTML and CSS Introduction. Please don't be intimidated by these acronyms. HTML simply means Hypertext Markup Language. It's an older and somewhat technical way to say that it just tells a browser how to display a web page. And we all use browsers every day, from Safari, Firefox, to Chrome, to Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge, to name a few. HTML only defines the structure of a website, though. And CSS, as we'll see later, defines how that structure looks, defines the style of that structure. Websites are almost always built with blocks of HTML called divisions. So imagine building a website with a bunch of blocks, and then we style those blocks with dimensions, borders, shapes, sizes, colors, fonts, etc. And we do that with CSS. CSS defines how HTML elements look and feel. So recall our boring website there, and with CSS, we can make it come to life. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next section. Welcome. In this section, I want to talk about HTML documents. Everything that a browser displays is contained in an HTML document. Each HTML document is just a file that ends in .html. So a website is just a collection of individual linked HTML documents, sometimes called web pages. The default or landing web page is index.html, or if you live in Microsoft world, it is default.html. Let's take a look inside an HTML document and see what is required for the browser to understand that it's HTML and understand how to display it. There are 5 required parts of an HTML5 document. HTML5 is the current version of HTML. The first part is a document type declaration. This is telling the browser to expect an HTML document. The second part is an HTML tag root element. HTML is written in structured tags, and we'll explore a little bit more about tags later on, but a hierarchical structure has a root element, and in this case, it's going to again tell the browser that this is an HTML document. The third thing an HTML5 document must have is meta information. This information is contained in the head tag, as we'll see later, and it is information that the browser interprets but does not display to the user except for a particular tag inside the meta information, which we'll talk about later, called title. And that brings us to the fourth part of an HTML5 document, which is that document title. And the document title technically goes inside the meta information area, and the document title displays on the title bar of the window or the tab in the browser. And then we have the document body. And everything after the document body is displayed to the user by the browser. Let's take a look at these 5 elements on a real website, and it happens to be my website. So the first item we have is the document type declaration. It is in gray at the top there, and it says doc type HTML. The second part is the HTML tag root element. And in this case, it says HTML, and it defines a language as United States English. However, this is not required. You do not have to define a language, but if your website is reaching international audiences, it's probably a good idea. The third part is meta information. Over on the HTML document, the meta information is contained inside those head tags, where you see head and then closer to the bottom /head. Everything inside there is meta information, information that is interpreted by the browser but not displayed to the user, except that document title. See where it says title and then /title? Everything in between those two title tags will be displayed at the top of the window or the tab. And then of course we have the document body. And again, everything after the document body is displayed to the user by the browser. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in the next section. HTML is written in tags. And tags look like this. It's simply a keyword surrounded by a greater than and a less than symbol. And remember that tags define the structure of an HTML document. We'll style the HTML document later when we do CSS. Tags always have an opening and a closing. The closing tag is just a / and then the same tag name. Let's look at our 5 components of an HTML5 document in tag form. Now remember, we had the document type, the root element, meta information, the document title, and the document body. And here are the tags for those items. The document type is a tag that has ! doc type HTML. The root element is simply a tag that says HTML. The meta information is the head tag. The document title is the title tag, and the document body is the body tag. Pretty self-explanatory. There are a lot of different tags that HTML can use, and HTML has been through 5 different versions, and each version has come with its own set of legal and illegal tags. In this discussion, we're going to stick with HTML5, and I want to talk about some what I would call well-worn tags. We have headings H1 through H5, and these tags come with a specific set of style that you do not have to define in your CSS. They are meant for paragraph headings, page headings, etc. The tag to make a link is A space href. A means active link, and href means hypertext reference. The tag we use for our building blocks, or divisions, is the div tag. And when we're simply just writing text, we almost always want to put it inside a paragraph tag, or the P tag. You'll also hear a term called elements. HTML elements are the opening tag, the closing tag, and the data in between those. So that title, welcome to my website, and then the closing title, that whole thing is referred to as an HTML element. Remember that the division tag is one of the most important tags in HTML. The div tag is the way we build the website with building blocks. And div tags can have attributes like ID, class, and style, and others. There's an example of a div tag down at the bottom. Div class equals header, welcome, and then closing of the div tag. Let's say we want to build a website with 3 distinct sections, divisions, or blocks, all the same thing. We want a header section, a main content section, and a footer section. And this is a pretty generic template. Many websites that you visit every day have these 3 primary sections. If you don't believe me, just go to cnn.com or something like that. Notice that we're giving our divs a class and a unique class for each div. Consider this like naming that div. And when we move on to CSS, this is how CSS will be associated with that particular div. So we have our document called index.html. We have the 5 required items for an HTML5 document. We have the doc type declaration, we have the HTML root element, and if you can see down at the very bottom, we've closed the HTML root element. We have the head and then the closing of the head tag. That's where all the meta information goes, including the title. We have the title tag there. And then we have the body tag, and notice the body tag is also closed at the bottom, but right before the HTML tag. And inside the body tag, we have 3 divisions, 3 building blocks, and we've named them something unique. So we have class, div class equals 1, 2, and 3. And that way, when we start styling those divs with CSS, we can style them differently. Thanks for joining me in this segment. I look forward to starting CSS with you in the next segment. Welcome to CSS. This is a short introduction to CSS and what it is. While we learned that HTML defines the structure of a website, CSS defines the style of a website. So we have the unclothed gentleman representing HTML and the very stylish gentleman representing CSS. CSS saves a lot of time and work. Few, and often just one, CSS files can define the style for many HTML documents. In the old days, each HTML document had to have its own separate style information. You could imagine that this could be a headache for web developers, especially when dealing with very large websites, where if you change an HTML element's style on one page, it won't reflect on any of the other pages. You have to go to all the pages and change that same element manually. With CSS, you change that element one time using CSS. All of those elements that you've changed are now populated to all of your HTML documents. Thanks for joining me in the CSS intro. Welcome to part 2 of our CSS discussion. CSS is made up of rule sets. A rule set is the combination of a selector and a declaration block. Inside the declaration block, we list property value pairs. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Over on our style.css, on the right side, we have our selector, that's .banner. We have the curly braces, and that indicates our declaration block. And then we have the property value pair that is inside the declaration block. In this case, background color is the property, and red is the value. Between the property and the value, we have a colon. And to end the property value statement, we have a semicolon. And of course, we can list multiple property values within that declaration block. Notice that the CSS selector is the same name as the class in the index.html file. And that's how CSS and HTML are able to talk to each other. And that CSS selector of .banner is going to select that class that's called banner in the index.html. And everywhere you indicate class equals banner, it's going to be styled with background color red. We have 3 kinds of selectors in CSS. We have a class selector, which is just a period, and we have an ID selector, which is a hashtag symbol or pound symbol, depending on how old you are. The difference between IDs and classes are that classes, just like in object-oriented programming, are meant to be reusable. And ID should only appear once. So if you're only styling one element for one time, then you can use an ID. If you're styling, for example, the same banner on every page, you should use class equals banner or whatever you want to name it. The element selector is the third type of selector that's important to understand about CSS. The element selector styles all elements of the same name. So for example, if you wanted to style all H1 elements, you wouldn't need a period or a hashtag sign. You would simply put H1 and then the curly braces. If you wanted to, likewise, if you wanted to style all P paragraph elements or anything else, calling it by its HTML element name, and you don't need a preceding symbol in that case. I see this often used with things like images or links, where all images or all links in the entire site should be styled one particular way. You can simply use the name of that element to style everything. The final thing I want to talk about is comments. Just like in all programming languages, comments are ignored by the browser. They're for the user to understand what's going on in the CSS document. In most CSS documents that I've seen, the author of the CSS document will put something in the comments before he or she starts writing the CSS. So for example, here I have in the comments my CSS document, a version number, and an author name. You don't have to do that. I see it a lot, but sometimes I don't see it as well. You can also use comments strategically if you have complex CSS to tell anybody reading it what the CSS is supposed to do. So if somebody else is going to troubleshoot your website, you may want to use comments to help with that effort. Thanks for joining me in this discussion about CSS. We're going to move on to our demos now, and that's where the fun begins. Let's talk about setting up your workspace. Surprisingly enough, we're only going to be using two tools to build our website. A text editor like Notepad or Notepad++, and a web browser like Google Chrome. If you're on a Mac, I recommend Text Edit, Text Wrangler, or Sublime Text, and then a browser of your choice. I prefer Google Chrome, but that's up to you. In our workspace, the first thing you want to do is create a folder that's going to contain all of our HTML and CSS web files along with our images and any other media we put into our website. So I'm going to simply create a folder and call it My Website. You can call it whatever you want. The landing page and the first file in any website should be index.html or default.html. And it's more ubiquitous on the internet to use index.html, so that's what I'm going to be using. So let's open Notepad++. Notepad++ is really nice because it can help us write our HTML by color coding things and telling us where we've forgotten to close tags that we've opened. But we have to first tell it which language to expect. So we simply go to Language, the H section, and HTML. Now before I go any further, I'm going to save this file. Let's go to Save As. I'm going to go to my folder, My Website, and save it as index.html so I don't forget where I put it later. Now I'm going to start writing my HTML. And remember, the 5 components of an HTML5 document are the doc type declaration, the HTML tag, the head tag, which has this title tag inside, and the body tag, in which we will put our content that's visible to the user. And we can't forget to close our body tag and our HTML tag. Or at least that we have the basic metadata of our website, of our HTML file. So we'll click on the Save or Save All buttons here on Notepad++. And if you recall, our website had 3 major areas: a banner, main content area, and a footer. And we define those by using div tags, which means division. And we give each div tag a class, so we know which tag to associate with which style when we make our CSS document. So I'm simply going to do class equals banner for the top one. And remember to always close HTML tags. And for the content area, I'll simply do content. And for the footer area, I'll simply call it footer. Now you can call these classes whatever you want. And we'll go ahead and save this index.html file. And let's create a new file, a new tab here. And let's go to Languages, and C, and then CSS. So let's make a style sheet, a CSS style sheet that corresponds to this HTML document. And before we do anything, I want to make sure I save it in the right folder with the right name. You can use whatever name you want. I like to use simply style.css. Now on the CSS side of things, it's common to notate the top part of the CSS file with the author and the version number of the CSS file. And you can do that by doing a slash and an asterisk. And to end the comments section, star or asterisk and then slash. Now we're going to write our actual CSS, and each HTML div element is going to be styled slightly differently, which is why we've named them 3 different things. So let's do the banner first. And a CSS class starts with a dot, and then the keyword, which was banner, and then curly braces, an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. And I like to give myself some room between those 2 curly braces because that's where I'm going to do my style. Now if we envision this banner, let's say that we want the banner to span the entire width of the window no matter how big the window is. We want it to stretch across the entire top part of the web browser window. So we're going to use a 100% width on this banner element. Width, colon, 100%, semicolon. And we'll save it. And how high do you think we want this to be? It's going to span the entire top part of the browser window width-wise, but height-wise, we don't obviously want it to be 100% because then it would fill up the entire window. So here's where we get to play around with numbers and see what it looks like, and then go back and modify the numbers as we need. So let's do height, and we'll do maybe 250 pixels, semicolon. Now imagine this banner. It's 100% wide, 250 pixels high, but it has no color or border or anything, so we still would not be able to see it in the web browser. For right now, just so we can see it, let's give it a border. And borders are easy in CSS. You just type the word border and you specify the width, 1 pixel for the line width. We can specify dotted or dashed or solid. For right now, let's just do solid. And a color. And I'll just do black for right now. I just want to be able to see this block. Okay, everything's saved. Now to make this index.html file know where its style sheet is, we have to do a special tag inside the head. And it goes like this: link rel equals sheet type equals text CSS and reference equals style.css. Now these 2 files are talking to each other, and the banner class has a height, a width, and a border. So let's minimize Notepad++, go into our website folder, and double click on this index.html. It looks like it's going to open up with Microsoft Edge, so I'm going to choose open with Chrome. And there's our div block that's 100% wide and 250 pixels high. Now notice, if I resize the window, the width travels with the size of the window, but the height will not because I have forced it at 250 pixels. But that looks just a little bit tall for my tastes, so let's bring that down to 150 pixels, and we will refresh the site, and that looks a bit better. Let's do roughly the same thing with our other 2 divs. We have content and footer. So I'm simply going to copy this whole block and paste it 2 more times. And I'm going to change the name, of course. We have content and footer. So right here. Now, pause the video and see if you can figure out what this website's going to look like when I refresh it. Okay, you ready for the reveal? 3, white boxes with black borders of the exact same size. You can see how this is going to turn into a website, but right now it doesn't really look like much. And I'm going to go to w3schools.com, which is a reference page that I believe you should have up constantly when you're designing and making websites. And I'm going to search for colors. And they have a nice HTML color picker, so we can get the value for any color that we want. So let's say for our header, we want this orangey color, but maybe a little bit darker. So let's say we want that. And it's going to give us this value right here that's called the hex value. So we're just simply going to copy that. And here in the banner, we're going to say background color colon that hex value. And a semicolon, and let's take the border away for right now, and let's see what that looks like. I like to look at the website at every step in the game, every step in the process. Okay, so now you have like a blood orange banner. The content area I think can probably stay white, but maybe we'll take off the border. Remember, I just put the borders there so we can see what we were doing. And the footer, we'll do a nice charcoal color. It's maybe about right there. It's 4B, 4B, 4B. That's easy enough to remember. So no border. And we'll refresh our site. And we didn't do something right. Let's take a look. We need to put that hashtag or # in front of the hex color value. Otherwise, it's not going to work. There we go. Let's subdivide the content area into 2 equal parts. So within this content div, we want to nest 2 other divs. And we'll name it div class left and div class right. And we need to make those 2 classes here in our style sheet, so we'll have left and we'll have right. And we can easily divide this into 2 areas by making the left and the right each 50% wide, right? Because 100% wide spans the whole window. 50% wide would span exactly half. So we'll do width 50% on both of these. And let's put a border around it so we can see them. 1 pix solid black for both. And we'll save that. Refresh. Aha, so we gave both of them a width of 50%. We didn't give them a height, and we didn't give them a place. So they're both in the same place. They don't have any height, but they are 50% wide. They're just overlapping each other. So let's give them a height. And since they're inside this content box, we can do a height of 100%. And we'll also use the float property. And the float property has 3 options: float left, float right, and float none. And so for the left side, we'll obviously do float left. For the right side, we'll do float right. And remember, we're still having a height of 100%, which will span the height of its parent object. I've also changed the width from 50% to 48%. We don't want these two blocks touching each other. It just won't look right. So let's see how this looks. There we go. There are two placeholders. They're each 48% wide. One's floating right, one's floating left. And we're really just doing that so that we can see where they are. And instead of borders, let's do background, color, and let's choose a different color here. Back on our color picker, let's do like a E6, E6, E6. And we will refresh that. And I didn't put the pound symbol there, that's why that didn't color. Okay, nice. Now we have a website with a content area with two individual blocks inside. But let's say this is going to be our blog, with the left block being much bigger than the right one, and the right one being a place for widgets and things like that. So let's make our left block 80 and our right block 15. There, that looks much better. All right, now the next thing we need to do, let's put some content in our website. In the banner area, you might want some sort of like welcome message, right? So let's do a level 1 header, that says, welcome to my blog. And watch what that does. To get that to vertically go down to the center, we might have to do some kung fu. But to get it away from touching the edges here, we can easily do that with margins and padding. So let's go back to our banner, style, and let's do margin, let's do padding, left, let's do 20 pixels, and see how that looks. Okay, great, but it pushed that over. So padding is not the right way that we want to do this. And margin isn't either, because if we did a margin, it would also push that whole orange block over. So what we want to do is give our H1 a distinct class, or in other words, a distinct style. And we'll call it welcome banner. Now let's style the welcome banner class. Now we can do margin left, and let's do 20 pixels again, and see how that looks. Aha, that's great. Now it pushed that over 20 pixels, and it did not push the orange bar past the site boundaries. Now we need to bring it down from the top a bit, so we'll have to use what's called a line height, and maybe about 30%. Too much. Actually, we're going the wrong way. That's too little, so let's try 70. Okay, coming back down, I guess we should try 170. Okay, we'll try 250. Almost there. Let's try 275. And that looks like that's about where we want it. Now this font's pretty generic as well. It looks like it's probably just Times New Roman or whatever my default font is on Chrome. So let's change the font. And if ever you don't know how to do something in CSS, you can always go back to your W3 Schools CSS reference, type in the word font or whatever you want to change. And here is CSS fonts. And it will tell you exactly how to do it. So what this is the font will specify Times New Roman. If the browser does not know what that font is, it will do a generic Times font. If it doesn't know what that is, it will do a generic serif font. And let's do a well-known font that we know the browser is going to have, Tahoma. And we'll refresh our site. There we go. Welcome to my blog in a non-serif font. And it's looking beautiful. Now let's work on the footer. And in the footer, we might want 2 separations there as well. This could have contact information, and this one could have social media icons. So let's do 2 divs under the footer. And actually, I'm just going to copy these. And change the names. Footer left. Footer right. And we'll add the CSS there. And we'll do footer right. And it's going to be a lot like these regular left and right ones. So we'll do, but let's not do 100%. Let's do height is 80%, width is 48%, and we'll do that for both of these. We'll save that. Now it's not going to look like anything yet because we've only given it a height and a width. We haven't colored it or put any content in it. So let's put some content in here, and it's just going to be some basic placeholder text. Okay, now we still need to, well, I'm going to leave that up to you. What do you think we still need to do to get these to go side by side? Well, what we need to do is do the float. So this is going to float left, and this is going to float right. I don't know what I was thinking there. Okay. There we go. We have left and right. Let's find some social media icons that we can use for our social media placeholder. I'll just steal something like that for right now. It's huge, but we can size it down in HTML. So let's save that in our website folder. Remember, everything we're doing is going to be saved in our website folder. And let's name it fb.png. It's a PNG image. Okay, now let's insert it into our footer. And it's going to be way bigger than our footer. So you'll see that it's going to actually throw our footer off a bit, but we can size it later. So we replace this, and we will do this tag is image src for source equals, and since we put this image in the same folder, all we have to do is type fb.png. And this image is a special tag that we can close within the tag just like that. And like I said, this is going to mess up the site, so we'll have to play around with the size later. Okay. So recall how tall we made the footer. We made the footer 100 pixels tall, so we want this icon about, I don't know, 65 pixels tall. And this is not CSS, so we can do it like that. It's not CSS. And there we go. And since we only specified the height, it'll keep the aspect ratio. Okay, there's our Facebook icon. It's touching the top, so maybe we would like to put a margin on the top there, or some padding. So instead of doing this height straight in the HTML, which we're technically not supposed to do, let's give this image element a class. And we'll call it SM icon, social media icons. Now let's make that class in here. And we'll do height 80 pixels. Margin top, maybe 10 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. Ah, there we go. Okay, much better, but still pretty big. I think, did we do 65 on the other one? Still too big for my taste. Let's do 35. Now we've got our Facebook icon positioned pretty much where we want it. And now what we want to do is put two other social media icons, perhaps LinkedIn and Twitter, horizontally next to each other and also next to the Facebook icon. And I've already downloaded the images for those in the same way that we downloaded the Facebook image, and I put them in our website folder. The LinkedIn one is ln.png and the Twitter one is tw.png. And the easiest way to do this, and maybe not the most efficient, but the easiest way to do this for right now, is to create a table with 3 cells. And we'll do that in HTML, and we'll put it inside this footer right class that we have. And we'll simply use the table tag. And again, I like to close my tags before I do anything else so I don't forget. And to make a row, we do tr, table row. We are only going to have 1 row, but we're going to have 3 columns, which is a td and there's our 3 cells, which are also our 3 columns because we only have 1 row. And now we need to put something in each of these cells. So for right now, Let's just put some placeholder text to make sure we're doing this correctly. We'll save that and refresh our site. And there we go, 3 placeholders, all horizontally next to each other. So that's great. Now we just need to replace this with the images. So the image tag is, remember, img src for source, and we had fb.png for the Facebook. Let's just make sure. It's still very large because we haven't styled it, but let's put all our icons there before we style them. For LinkedIn, we had ln.png. Perhaps not. Let's take a look at what our LinkedIn file name is. Yes, ln.png and tw.png. I spelled that wrong. src. Now we'll do img src equals tw.png for our Twitter icon. And let's save and see what this looks like by simply refreshing our page. Okay, we have huge social media icons, but they are next to each other like we want. So now we just have to size them down. So let's give each of these images the same class. Class equals sm icon. Sm icons is what we did, I believe. And I'll just copy and paste that onto each of these images. And let's see if we still have that style. Yes, SM icons. We have a height and we have a margin from the top, so that'll be good. Let's save that and refresh our page. Beautiful. There are our social media icons. And now let's actually link them to our social media profiles. So wrapping around this image tag, we're going to create a link tag, and that is A for active link, a space, href for hypertext reference, equals, and then the URL to your, in this case, Facebook profile. But I'll just do facebook.com. On the other side of this image icon, we close the A tag. And let's see what that does. And it makes that a link. But I did the link incorrectly. I should have put the full URL, which is http://facebook.com. Let's see if it works now. Beautiful. Let's do the same for LinkedIn and Twitter. I'll simply copy that, paste it 2 more times, but change the URL. Save that. Let's make sure all of our links work. We have LinkedIn. We have Twitter, and we have Facebook. So that's the right side of our footer. And on the left side of our footer, let's place some contact information. And here's our left footer div where we just have placeholder content. So let's embed a Google map. And let's say we're on 123 Main Street. Chicago metropolitan area. That's great. And we'll choose Share, and then embed map. And we'll simply copy that embed URL and place it right there. And as you can see, it's going to place it in an iframe. And an iframe is just an isolated little box of HTML that doesn't affect the rest of the site. So we'll see what that looks like. It's pretty, but it's huge. So let's see what we can do here. So the iframe has a width and a height specified. So let's bring that down a bit to half. So we'll do 300 and 225. And we'll see what that looks like. Still pretty big, but I don't think we want to go too much smaller on that. Let's just make the footer bigger. So on our class footer, over in our style, let's make the height 500 pixels and see what that looks like. Okay, now the map fits nicely in there. We probably don't need 500 pixels. We'll do 400 pixels. Okay, much better. Let's move that map down just a little bit so it's not touching the top edge. And we'll do that with a margin. So on footer left, let's put the same margin as our social media icons. Margin top, 10 pixels. So it should bring that down off of the edge. And great, it does. And I want to bring it off the edge of the left side too. So let's do margin left, and we'll do 20 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, much better. This is starting to look more like a legitimate website. Let's expand this window a bit. And the footer doesn't need to be that big. "300 pixels should be good." Let's refresh it. Much better. Now let's work on our content areas, and we'll do that in the next video. Okay, let's work on our content areas. We have a main content area and a widget area, and let's double check what we've named those two areas. Okay, it looks like we just named them left and right. Let's double check here. We have a content class and two classes in there, left and right. So that will be great. So for the left side, we're going to put our main content area, and on the right side, we'll put our widget area. Notice how our content left and our content right touch the borders of their parent block. And their parent block is, of course, just this content block right here. So let's make the left and right not touch the borders by doing the same margin technique that we've been doing with the footer. So we'll do margin. For left, we'll do margin top equals 10 pixels. Margin left, and we'll do 20 pixels. We'll do 20 pixels from the edges and 10 pixels from the tops and bottoms. So that reminds me, margin bottom 10 pixels as well. And we don't need to do a margin right because there's already a space there because we only did 80% and 15%. So I'm simply going to copy that and paste it over here on our right side as well. And make it look reasonably good. Okay, after doing the same margin technique that we used for the footer, what happened was this top margin pushed this block down to overlap the footer, and we don't want that. And that's partly because we made the height 100%. We forced it to be 100%. So let's change that to be 90% and see what that looks like. Okay, that's roughly what we want. Let's do the same to the right side. I'm simply going to put the same margins there on the right side. I just copied and pasted that. And I'll change this height to 90%. And I want margin right to be 20 pixels, not left. And let's see what that looks like. Awesome. Okay, this is great. This is what we wanted. Now we can put some text or images or whatever we want in our website, in our blog. So on the left side, let's put some text and an image. For text, let's use the paragraph tag. And we'll put a placeholder paragraph. We'll close the p tag. And then let's put an image. Now we have to find an image, obviously. So let's just download one from the internet. And we'll steal that one for now. And that image is actually huge. Let's try to find a smaller image so it won't mess up our website too badly. Of course, we can fix it with CSS, but let's just make things easy right now. We'll go to Search Tools, go to Size, and let's do Medium. Or maybe even icon. There we go. And remember, save your image in the My Website folder. I'm just renaming it. You could have left it at the same name, that's fine. Now let's put that image right here. And we'll be done with the left side. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, and the image is overlapping because it's just too big for that space that we've defined. And let's see how we can fix that. Because I forced the height of the content to be 300 pixels, and this text plus this kitty image is more than 90% of 300 pixels. Remember, the white part is 300 pixels. The gray part is 90% of that. So this text plus this image takes up more than 90% of 300 pixels. So let's just make the image smaller or make the content area larger. And I think it's just going to be easier to make the content area larger at this point. So let's just go to 400. There we go, much better. And let's remove the gray from this content area. I only put that gray there so I could see where it was. You can leave it there if you want. But on left, let's take out that background color. And on right, we'll do the same. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, great. Let's put some content in the widget area, which is right. And right here, div class right. We'll do a paragraph with widget text. And again, you can put images or links or whatever you want here as well. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, we have widget text, main placeholder, we have an image, we have a Google map, we have links to our social media, we have a title. I think that pretty much sums it up. And this gives you a good idea of what you can actually do with basic HTML and CSS. And now I encourage you to go to w3schools.com and find out what else you can do. And use the CSS reference and HTML references on w3schools.com. And play around and perfect your website. I thank you for joining me in this section, and I thank you for joining me in this class.